The Prime Minister refusing, Mike, to call it a crisis. Do you think it's a crisis?
Good morning. It is a crisis. Look, we can't call it anything else. For the first time that I worked in the NHS, which is coming up to 25 years now, you call an ambulance, you might not think it'll turn up. You go to A&E, you don't think that you'll be seen in a time that you'll be where they might be able to help you. It's nearly impossible to get an appointment with a GP. It's nearly impossible to get an appointment elsewhere. You're waiting over a year for treatment. Come on, if that's not a crisis, I don't know what is.
What about the interim measures that Darren mentioned there? Any effect from those, do you think?
I don't think they go far enough. We spent the last 2 years, more than 2 years, not wanting the NHS to be put under pressure. We've spent the last 2 years saying we don't want the NHS to be overwhelmed. And finally, it's overwhelmed and we're not doing anything about it. So, we need all hands to the pump, really. We need everyone having a concerted effort. They need to throw money at the situation to get over the crisis and then possibly think of a longer term strategy. But at the moment, we need to be asking everyone for their help, whether it's the voluntary sector, whether it's the private sector, whether it's the NHS. We need everyone to be doing their bit to make sure that people can be seen in a timely fashion until we're over this hump of winter, which was very, very predictable. We knew it was going to be a bad winter. All of the experts and all the projections were that we were going to have an enormous, overwhelming demand after the hump of COVID. Now, once we've got over that, we need to think of a longer term solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you talk about needs cash now. Rishi Sunak and the Chancellor announced 500 million back in the autumn statement. They've announced a further 200 million to try and get so-called bed blockers out of hospitals to free up beds there, and a further 50 million to try and help discharge people more quickly, a so-called discharge fund. So they are chucking money at the problem. But I'm interested in what you say about how you need to try and get people to use the NHS better. I mean, at the weekends, someone thinks their child might have strep A. They can't get hold of a GP because GPs don't work on a Sunday. What are they supposed to do? A lot of them can't help but go to A&E. It's not the public's fault, is it? Shouldn't GPs work at weekends, like you? So I do out-of-hours shifts like a lot of GPs do. So there is a general practice service that over the weekend, but it is for urgent and emergency things only. And yes, to your point, that we should have a system where there is enough capacity to deal with the people who are worried about their possibility of strep throat. I would argue, though, and I don't think this is the general public's fault, but I would argue that there is a lack of being able to access information about when to worry about certain conditions. So in the last couple of weeks, most of my surgery has been with upper respiratory tract infections, of which 99% of them were viral. And most of what I did was giving people reassurance. Now, once again, I'm really happy to do that because people are obviously worried about it. But there is a plethora of information available, even on the NHS website, about when to worry about something and when not to worry about something, and when to seek medical advice and when not to seek medical advice. And once again, I don't think we're doing enough to push people towards that sort of self-care and direction. And so that the people who really need to see me, the people who perhaps need to see me or my colleagues, and don't forget, there's nurse practitioners, there's paramedic practitioners, a load of other people that people can see, could get the treatment that they need. Now, once again, I would never do public blaming about this. I don't think we do enough on educating people to self-care like they perhaps did do a decade ago. We've seen quite the opposite. We're seeing a lot of, if you're worried in any way whatsoever, contact your GP. Once again, that does nothing to the pressures of the NHS. And what you've got is this sort of knock-on effect that when we reach capacity, and believe you and me, I have never been so busy. We are seeing 2.5, 3 times the number of patients that we were seeing 5 years ago. When we reach that level, there is no more capacity, and then the spillover does go to A&E, and it breaks my heart that happens. But unfortunately, we've got capacity and demand, and we just don't have enough capacity at the moment, which is earlier to my point. We need to get capacity wherever we can. We don't have enough GPs, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough anyone at the moment working in the NHS. And that's where I think the money perhaps needs to be diverted in recruiting those people, rather than these sort of Cinderella projects about bed block. Disgusting term, if you ask me. I don't think anyone should be called a bed blocker. Yeah. Nobody's staying in their bed because they don't need to be. I think that, yes, there's some red tape that needs to be cut around that, but I don't think that actually, chucking money to create more places is just going to be the end of it. And we do need a longer-term solution because this will happen again.
Mike, I can't talk to you for any longer, but I just wanted to make a comment. I've spent nearly 3 weeks in NHS hospitals over the past few months, and I just want to say, politicians, I do think they do chuck money. They do that at times, but I think that they know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And you were talking about some of the stuff that need to be valued. Staff need to be valued. If we value the NHS, if you're out applauding and clapping during COVID, then politicians should be putting their money where their mouth is and valuing the professions, valuing GPs, valuing people who are carers and nurses and all the rest, all the theatre staff and whatever. Got to move, Mike. That's my little bit said.
Thanks,
Thank you very much indeed.